Alrighty then, waiting on confirmation here, but I think I am live, and that is okay by me. That means today we are talking about session 2, numero dos, of The Heart of Orleans, my new Scion campaign. Today's campaign diary talking about the running of the bulls, but first some catch up and a little bit of other things along the way. So, hopefully people will be in here soon, but in the meantime, let's get a rolling. Daring do, you do daring X. Somebody come and get this hack off my stoop. Doppelganger, don't even know her, not even in my blood group. Our band of merry men ain't so merry, and Mary wishes she was good as us. One of y'all is out the loop. Seriously. Anywho, last session, the characters went back to potions after their Session 0, they met some NPCs, the Amazons Hippa and Lila, Mama Marcia that works there, as well as their divine leaders, as I'm calling them, so kind of the heads of their pantheons, Damballa, Zeus, and Odin. And they got some questions answered, and we talked a little bit about how important I think that is, especially when we're talking about games like this that have, you know, kind of in-depth lore to a point, but more importantly, really depend upon your players, you know, knowing some of those things and feeling confident that they, you know, feel like they know what's going on. And of course, they heard about the running of the bulls, and that's what set up the main, I won't say conflict, but the main event for this session. So what happened at the beginning? Well, first, Charles had deemed that he was going to meet with Hippa and Lila the next day at the church and would be able to be more honest, be able to be more upfront. And so July 27th, the next day, they came by the church, and he and the two ladies had a little chat. So what exactly did they talk about? Well, they talked about what's really around New Orleans. What are the strange things that go bump in the day and night? And what's really around here. So some of the things they talked about, well, of course, Amazons, them. There's a few more, not a lot, but a few, you know, a small group, 10 or 12. There are, of course, Scions, you know, and Charles got to learn a little bit that Scions is not just the name for the weird things that are out there, but specifically for the children of the gods. Of course, there are Rougarou, you know, the old stories from out in the swamp that Charles may have grown up with, but Orion definitely did. You know, they're true. And there are these weird wolf human things out in the swamp that kidnap children. Vampires, of course, it is New Orleans. There has to be vampires all up and down Bourbon Street, sucking blood and sipping wine and just enjoying themselves. Various therianthropes being anyone who turns into an animal of some kind. So Rougarou are their own thing, therianthropes are their own thing. And, you know, in the same way that you got werewolves and were-rats and were-owls and you know, all kinds of different things. But those in Rougarou are different. And of course, there's very old things. This is an old country, and there are stories from hundreds of years ago. Well, some of those things are older than that, even older than the stories themselves. And of course, this is still New Orleans, so there's lots of things that come and go. You know, the Netjay are in town right now. The Egyptian gods and goddesses. So, you know, all kinds of things kind of wander in and out of town. It just depends on what time of year and what exactly is going on. So they chatted a little bit about that, you know, got to get some honest answers and feel more in tune with everything going on. And of course, reported back to the group and said blah, which is a little thing that I like to call, you know, where, you know, everyone is at the table. They all hear these conversations. And rather than having Charles have to sum it up to them, he can just say blah, and everybody knows what's going on. There are times that I won't allow that to happen, and there are games where I don't allow it to happen, absolutely. But most of the time, a blah is sufficient, you know, and just let the players progress, because it's really not about transmitting all that information between everyone. Sometimes it's just about knowing and moving on. You know, that's really it. So, of course, then we come to the running of the bulls. On Sunday, July 31st, there is the Other Worlds running of the bulls. But, of course, bulls are minotaurs in this case. So there are 6 runners that get squared up, and I set that scene. So Painkiller Jane and John James Williams are both going to run. There is the man that they met the session, well, not met, but saw the session before, looked an awful lot like Charles Jenkins, but just kind of different wrong, some might say. Little Mao, who's actually a character from Scion's 2nd edition, who is a half Chinese, half African-American young kid out of San Francisco who does not realize that his father, I don't remember, his Chinese parent is actually a god, so he's a Scion. It was their example character that they used in the book. Delightful little read. I actually think probably one of my favorite example characters from a game, where in the character creation section, they lead you through creating a character by creating this particular thing. And yeah, so they use Little Mao, and it's delightful. He is peak, like, mid 2000s, crazy about hip hop culture, and has dreads, but is also Chinese and into like blaxploitation films and kung fu, and it's just delightful. And of course, to Rougarou. Now, earlier, the day, in the couple days before, the Amazons had mentioned to Charles that there are Rougarou, but no one really sees them. They don't really leave the swamp. So this was kind of that fun little, I seeded it for a reason, we never seen them. They hold to themselves. They're really creepy, and they just exist out there in the swamp. And, of course, when we get to the running of bulls, there's 2 of them right there, exactly as the story said. And that weirds out everybody involved. So it was a good time. You will notice there in the bottom, my Minotaurs, my painted ones. So this is the ones that I painted a couple years ago. And I decided to make them Holsteins because what's the point of having cow people if they're not going to be Holsteins? So, yeah, so those were the Minotaurs that were pursuing them in the running of the bulls. But how exactly did I run this? Well, I ran it kind of like a chase from Call of Cthulhu. So in Call of Cthulhu, there is these stops, these little, bumps in the road that you hit, and you have to pass by those. And of course, the thing behind you is doing the same. And so what I did was I just put those stops together. The only difference is they were being chased, but they were being chased by something that moves just one stop at a time. And so at each stop, there was some sort of situation. And I just described the situation. How they decided to get through that was entirely up to the players. And so I just described the situation and said, there you go. What are you going to do? My only rule was you cannot use the same combination of attribute and ability more than once. So you can go strength and athletics once. You can go dexterity and melee once. And that is, kind of the way that I tried to get through it. And I said one success is enough to get through to the next stop. And if you want to do anything other than just deal with whatever the scenario is, you're at a -2 because you're trying to do two things at once. You're trying to run really fast and get through all these obstacles, but you are also trying to, deal with whatever strange thing you decide is your next big thing. So, what were the stops? Well, I'm really proud of some of these. So let's talk through each of them one by one. Of course, right at the beginning, on your mark, get set, go! And I asked them all, how are you able to get to the front of the group? Because, of course, it's not just about if you get got, it's if the others get got instead of you. And so I said, no matter what, you're going to pass through this one, but if you get 3 or more successes, you're going to get to skip stop 2 and go straight to stop 3. And none of them did that, I think, but they got to have a pretty good start here. Stop 2 is the mule and buggy, the slowest annoyances in the quarter. If any of you have ever been to New Orleans, there are these mule and buggy tour companies, and they will ride all over the French Quarter, which has cars in it, and they go on the street, and they are incredibly slow, and it is really, really annoying when you're trying to drive around the French Quarter to go wherever it is that you're going, because you live there and there's a mule in front of you, and it will absolutely slow you to a drag, and you just hope that they turn in a couple blocks because they take up the whole damn road. So how are you gonna get around that? Next up, of course, potholes. Seriously, they're everywhere. How are you going to get through them? And again, any of you who've ever been to New Orleans will know of the legendary potholes. Each of these pictures here is an actual pothole in New Orleans. Most of them I have actually seen. This is not even... I couldn't find the most epic one that I ever saw, which was one where someone had stuffed a full... washer-dryer dual unit, like where they're on top of each other, in the hole, and you could see it outside of that. It was absolutely insane, and so I just included this little meme at the end, and that is absolutely true. I can firmly believe in losing someone into a pothole in New Orleans. I once hit a car into one and totaled it just from hitting a pothole. Now, it wasn't the best car to begin with, but it's still just absolutely ridiculous. So how are you going to get around all these potholes? Because they are freaking everywhere. Stop 4, couch! And this is my absolute favorite stop that I made. And I just said, you hear out of a second-story window, piece of shit, give this to your whore! And a couch comes sailing out of the second-floor balcony into the street, and just like that, straight into you. So how are you going to deal with this? And Jane had the best answer. And she said, well, I'm going to catch it and throw it at the Minotaurs. I said, holy shit. All right, yeah, that's a -2, but give it to me. And she managed to get 4 successes. So I said, that is plenty. And she grabbed the couch as it was coming at her and threw it at the Minotaurs. And it was absolutely marvelous. Picture perfect moment. Loved it. And of course, this is getting long. You've been running for a bit now. Are you getting tired? And hey, how you keeping up with, you've run for about a mile now at as fast as you can. How are you keeping going? Stop 6, turn onto canal. So, it's hard to turn when you're moving at top speed, and top speed is, Usain Bolt level speed. So, how are you going to turn a 90-degree turn just like that? Of course, stop 7. This was actually my player's favorite big winner. You hear a thunderous scream, and a gaggle of drunks run to the street from Harrah's yelling, yeah, jackpot! And there's just this massive group of people there. And how are you going to get through all of them? Because they are drunk as fuck and do not care. This was the only stop that actually got a genuine laugh from one of my players, and it was absolutely delightful. This was another one that I was really proud of, along with the couch too. Then, of course, another turn. We're getting onto the street leading directly to the river, and turning is even harder when you're tired. So how are you getting through this one? You're still going full speed. And, of course, the last stop, the river. It's been a long run. Can you finish? And I actually dictated this one. I said, this is a stamina plus fortitude roll. They did not get to decide how they were getting through it. They just had to power through to that last moment. And if that meant that they had used stamina plus fortitude before, then so be it. That's fine. They didn't know that this was coming up. It was a great time. It was fun. It was creative. We saw some really interesting interactions. I also kind of rolled for, Charles's doppelganger and Little Mao and the 2 Rougarous. And unfortunately, no one got run over. I was too easy on them, and I made a pretty big mistake here. And that's that I forgot how easy it is to succeed in Scion. And I forgot one of the things that I had talked about in my session 0 video of this game is If you only get one success on something, you succeed. You get through, but there's a but. And I really forgot to give them the buts. And it's actually probably one of my biggest failures as a DM and as a game master. I am very poor at remembering to do the yes buts. And I'm very good at no buts, but I'm very, very poor at yes buts. So yeah, it was fun. It was good, but I think it would have been a lot more interesting and a lot more tense, I would say, if we had, been able to succeed a little, if they had faced some more adversity. And so it was good. It just wasn't great. So, of course, they went back to potions. That is where the poor me was being held, which is a standard thing after the wedding of the bulls in New Orleans and in Spain. And so there's cheers all around for the runners. The Minotaurs are all super excited. They all talk about not starting a moo. It was a fun little interaction. I don't know if you guys know anything about cows, but it is a thing that if one cow moos, it is frequent that it will start this cacophony of them throughout the horde. And so that was a fun little thing. And Carter Johnson introduced himself to Charles Jenkins, and eagle-eared listeners, eagle-eared? I don't know. Bat-eared? I don't know. Whatever. I don't know. There's got to be a good version of that. Anywho, may notice that both of those names start with CJ. And so this is Charles Jenkins' doppelganger. It looks exactly like him, but just wrong. And he introduces himself to Charles and says, "We need to talk." And all the other players pick up on the social cue, and Charles picks up on the social cue, and all of them are like, what is going on with this guy? Almost everyone was like, how do I help? What can I do? How do I get him out of here? Like, Charles does not need to talk to this guy. He is bad news. And they immediately get this feeling. But a few of them did well enough on their social deduction rolls to say, you know that he's a bad dude, and there's something going on there that is not good. But for some reason, you trust him with Charles. You wouldn't trust him with yourself in a brightly lit room at noon. But you do trust him with Charles. And so Charles and he go over and chat a bit. And reveal that they're half-brothers, kind of, for lack of a better word. So Legba, who is Charles Jenkins' father and divine parent, has kind of another side, a mirror image. Now, people within the voodoo circle would not necessarily say this. I think this is one of the relics of Scion First Edition and of that early 2000s design where they wanted to kind of... they needed to oversimplify to a point. They took the stories that white people tell about voodoo and kind of said, this is what voodoo is, obviously. And that's just not necessarily true in any sort of real practice, but it's the way the game's written, and it is, for lack of a better word, simpler. None of my players are voodoo practitioners. None of my players are even pagan. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, using those stories to tell a different kind of story. It's one of the fundaments of urban fantasy is that, sometimes the fake stories are real, sometimes the real stories are real, and sometimes neither one is real. So... yeah, so they have a conversation, and so Carter is born from Kalafu, or Kafu, who is that mirror image of Legba. If Legba opens the door, Kalfu closes it. If Legba is out in the daylight, then Kalfu is out at the nighttime. If Legba is maybe not on the right side of the law, but never gets caught. Kalfu does. And so they are mirror images of each other. And the same thing in Carter Johnson and Charles Jenkins. We'll learn more about Carter's story later on, but just know for right now that he is not a good person. He is downright evil, with a big old capital E. And so he tries to suss out if he can convince Charles to turn, to work for him and his little cadre. And he kind of hints to Charles that he wants to make some big changes around here. And Charles notices on him that he is wearing manacles with a broken chain off of them. And maybe that means something. And so, but Charles he's an upstanding, good person. He's a, downright Boy Scout in some ways. And so, he gives some half-truths and some small answers. And basically, Carter realizes, look, this guy is way too straight for my gang, and disappears into smoke and is gone. But, I wanted to have that interaction. I want to have that little, the classic villain meets hero, and they have a conversation, neither one knowing fully exactly what's going on. Or maybe the villain does, but the hero does not. So it was a really great scene. I think it played out very, very, very well. And that the player kind of understood what was going on. The other players kind of understood what was going on. And the villain got a little sensation for who these people are. And that they are fiercely loyal, even though they've just met. And of course, after that, we wrapped up a little bit. Charles and Ryan decided to talk with Hippa and Lila about Carter and who he is. They found out that he is bad news. None of them liked him. All of them were just like, nope, this guy is bad news. You should stay the fuck away from him. Don't even think about it. And then there was titties and mooing. And they went outside. They found some drunks. They, partied on the balcony. And they got the Minotaurs into a moo because that's fun. And that was about it. Not a huge session. Most of it dominated by the running of the bulls and the conversation with Hippa and Lila. But yeah, it was a good time. Even though I made these mistakes, I think that the run was still fun. Talking with all of them afterwards, they all still had a good time, even if it wasn't maybe as tense as I wanted it to be. It was still a good time. So, homework for this week. What interesting things would you put in a race if you were, making this foot race or even a car chase, that sort of thing, and you were putting in these stops? What fun little interactions would you put in there? Next week, session 3, a murder investigation, and kind of the start of the real, big air quotes on real, not that the things that have been happening right now aren't the real plot, but they aren't the point, I think next week we're really going to burrow down into getting into the Titan spawn and who these characters are really opposing, and that's a big thing. So yeah, murder investigation. It's a good time. It was a great time, and we'll go from there. In the meantime, my office hours are closed. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a wonderful evening, and